Alright, good morning everyone. We are here with break 458. It is another 26 League Heroes retail combo break featuring the 26 League Heroes case, the 26 League Heroes starter case, as well as the bonuses. The 26 League Heroes hobby box, as well as the 26 sticker album and box combo. The bonuses are randomised at the end of the break between all 17 teams, with the winner having the bonuses sent out with their break cards. Our team list for this one: Broncos, Katie Hastings; Raiders, Dean Mich; Bulldogs, Carol Gilmour; Sharks, James Merrick; Dolphins, Nicholas Verwey; Titans, Zachary Thurston; Manly, Zachary Thurston; Storm, Peter Lowe; Knights, Scott McBryde; Cowboys, Nicholas Verwey; Eels, Craig Hyde; Panthers, Shane Murtagh; Rabbitohs, Johnny D; Dragons, Warren Stoddart; Roosters, Chris Hughes; Warriors, Peter Lowe; and Tigers, Chris Rose. Alright, let's change our screen. Bring our YouTube chat up. You'll see in the chat I've posted the link for break 459. There is still 9 teams available in that one. And here are our bonuses that will randomise at the end of the break. Don't forget the sticker album comes with the bonuses, the bonus sticker packs as well. I'm not sure, if you're lucky, if there's enough stickers with the bonus ones to complete a set, but if not, Select will have the individual stickers available on their website. I'm not sure what that date is, I can't remember, sorry. But if you check, I'm pretty sure it's in the album and possibly on the box. That information is there. Alright, let's get into our starter packs. So we are scheduled to start at 10, and now by the time we actually get started it will be 10 o'clock. You might find me tending to start these ones a few minutes early because the 40 starter packs is a lot to get through. We've started splitting it into lots of 10. Well, I've started splitting it in lots of 10 as of yesterday. Because I realised me opening all 40 of them is a long procedure. We also listed break 460 today, which made me realise that's, no, 461, sorry, is now in stock. If you had that in your coming soon wish list, you would have got an email notification this morning. But yeah, that made me realise we're now at pretty much 50 case breaks for 26 League Heroes. That's a mixture of retail cases, hobby cases, starter cases, some of the combos. Like, yeah, there's a lot of boxes and cases and packets. Alright, we will open those first for this first 10. Oh, yeah. That's not as bad as what I first thought it was going to be. I hope that's not a sign of today's break. The weather is about that, let me tell you. Alright, first 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, stay still. I'm having a shocker already and we haven't even started. Alright, first up, Chanel Harris-Tavita for the Warriors. If you didn't watch the break yesterday, you should check out the break pictures. We had so many doubles. Dominic Young for the Knights. Isaiah Yeo for Panthers. Reece Welsh for Broncos. Lehe Hopewate for Manly. Val Holmes for the Dragons. Jermaine Isako for the Dolphins. Tom Starling for the Raiders. Malaki Fodawaika for the Titans. Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. And that's our first 10. Alright, next 10 ready to go. Reuben Cotter for the Cowboys. Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Adam Fanua-Blake for the Sharks. Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Ryan Pappenhausen for the Storm. It's been a good spread so far. Hopefully it continues. Jerome Lowe for the Tigers. Reuben Garrick for Manly. Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Nico Hines for the Sharks. Jerome Hughes for the Storm. Doggies last to hit. Oh, and Roosters. Hopefully that's this 10. Hope everyone's got their tips in. Origin tomorrow night is included. You may have to go back and revisit the rest of the round's tips after tomorrow night, depending on injuries and such. But yes, make sure you at least get your tip in for tomorrow night. And not a bad idea if you do them all while you're there, and that way if you do forget to go back, they're at least done. Oh, that sucks, buddy. All right, next 10. Reuben Garrick for Manly. Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Nico Hines for the Sharks. Jerome Hughes for the Storm. Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Murray Talagi for Cowboys. Hope you break big. Maybe Dolphins will go well in the race. Well, this is true. Junior Paulo for the Eels. Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Doggies and Roosters, still no luck. Still 12 to go. Well, 11 after this one. Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. And Stefano Utakamanu for Storm. Dream Buller for the Tigers. Robert Toya for the Roosters. Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Alright, last 5. Doggies and Roosters. Finally got something in there. Let's see if we can hit something for those teams that have only got 1. There's plenty with 2s and 3s. Couple of doubles, not too many though. Liam Martin for the Panthers. League heads, Luke Brooks for Manly. Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Last one, Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. Alright, let's get into the packets. First packet, we have an instant win. How's that, the very last starter packet? Luminous Alex Twal for the Tigers. Bang Asaya Iongi for the Eels. Luminous Tyron Wishart for the Storm. Game Breakers Abby Church for the Eels. Luminous Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Game Breakers Isaac Tago for Panthers. Luminous Cohen Hess for the Cowboys. Bang Casey McLean for Panthers. Luminous Nico Hines for the Sharks. League heads Payne Haas for the Broncos. Luminous Hammer for the Dolphins. Bang Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Hudson Young for the Raiders. Die cuts Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Leka Halasima for the Warriors. League heads, Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Luminous, Jerome Lowe for the Tigers. Bang, Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Luminous, Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Robert Toya for the Roosters. Luminous, Jamie Chapman for the Titans. League heads, Wade Egan for the Warriors. Luminous, Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers, Tolator Koala for Manly. Luminous, Ben Hunt for the Broncos. Kyle Flanagan, a die cut for the Dragons. Luminous, Asaya Iongi for the Eels. League heads, Ethan Bullymore for Manly. Luminous, Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. League heads, Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Asaya Yo for Panthers. Red Triumph, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Dylan Brown for the Knights. Bang, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Game breakers, Zach Labert for the Cowboys. Luminous, Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Die cuts, Clayton Folalo for Manly. Luminous, Angus Crichton for the Roosters. League heads, Zach Lomax for the Eels. Luminous, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. League heads, Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. Luminous, Taylor Preston for the Bulldogs. Bang, Tamir Martin for the Warriors. Luminous Ethan Gilmour for Manly. Game Breakers, Whenua Pole for the Tigers. Luminous, Jaden Campbell for the Titans. Die cut, Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Kurt Catewell for the Warriors. Bang, Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Whenua Pole for the Tigers. Luminous, Jesse Colquhoun for the Sharks. League heads, Adam Whenua Blake for the Sharks. Luminous, Dream Buller for the Tigers. Game Breakers, Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Luminous, Xavier Coates for Storm. Game Breakers, Anessa Biddle for the Sharks. Luminous, Ruben Cotter for Cowboys. League heads, Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous, Dylan Egan for the Dragons. Game Breakers, Tui Kamika for Storm. Luminous, Abby Church for the Eels. Die cut, Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. Luminous, Herbie Farnworth for the Dolphins. Bang, Greg Marzu for the Knights. Luminous, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. League heads, Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous, Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. Game Breakers, Jalen de Groot for Titans. Luminous, Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Nakora. Bang, Kale Iro for the Sharks. Luminous, Gehamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. League heads, Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Jacob Preston, Luminous for the Bulldogs. Die cut Thomas Jenkins for Panthers. Luminous Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Let's go move this lot out of our way before it gets any bigger. And let's keep going. Gladiators, Adam Fanua Blake for the Sharks, number 233. Luminous Nelson Sofa Solomona for Storm. League heads John Bateman for the Cowboys. Luminous Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. Game breakers Nita Maynard for the Dragons. Luminous Apisai Coruscant for the Tigers. Die cut Aaron Clark for the Warriors. Luminous Luca Moretti for the Eels. Bang AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. Game breakers Patricia for the Warriors. Luminous Alefiana Kampi Era for Titans. League heads Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Luminous Addo Carr for the Eels. Mercury Brian Kelly for the Titans, number 369. Luminous Isaac Tago for Panthers. League heads Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Keezy Apps for the Tigers. Die cut Latu Finu for the Tigers. Luminous Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Game breakers Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. League heads Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous Jason Saab for Manly. Red Triumph, Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous Kale Iro for the Sharks. Game Breakers, Gehamat Shabarski for the Broncos. Luminous Scott Drinkwater for Cowboys. League Heads, AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. League Heads, Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Luminous Liam Martin for Panthers. Bang Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous Val Holmes for the Dragons. League Heads, Jareem Bula for the Tigers. Luminous Big Tino for the Titans. Game Breakers, Asaya Yongi for the Eels. Luminous Yasmin Clydesdale for the Knights. Mercury Lycan King Togia for the Dragons, number 412. Luminous Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Die cut Sua Wong for the Roosters. Luminous Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. League Heads, Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous Max Plath for the Dolphins. Game Breakers, Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Luminous Sean Russell for the Eels. Die cuts Nico Hines for the Sharks. Luminous Zali Hopkins for the Dragons. League Heads, Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Luminous Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. League Heads, Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Luminous Jerome Hughes for Storm. Game breakers, Max Plath for the Dolphins. Luminous, Casey McLean for Panthers. Bang, Roger Tuivasa Sheck for the Warriors. Luminous, Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. League heads, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous, Samaima Torfa for the Raiders. Die cuts, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Luminous, Tamir Martin for the Warriors. Bang, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous, Robert Toya for the Roosters. League heads, Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Dominic Young for the Knights. And let's shift this pile out of our way. We have an origin predictor. Amoli Olika R2 Luminous for Manly. Bang, Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Adam Dewey for the Tigers. Bang, Brian To'o for Panthers. Luminous, Jermaine McEwen for the Knights. Game breakers, Tommy Turbo for Manly. Luminous, James Tedesco for the Roosters. League heads, Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. Luminous, Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous, Ethan Sanders for the Raiders. Gladiators, Val Holmes for the Dragons, number 460. Luminous, William Kennedy for the Sharks. League heads, Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. Luminous, Chance Nico Klokstad for the Warriors. Mercury, Dean Mariner for the Broncos, number 317. Luminous, Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Red Triumph, Hamali Olika-Atu for Manly. Luminous, Dean Mariner for the Broncos. League heads, Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous, Lehe Hopawate for Manly. Red Triumph for the Tigers. Luminous, Reed Marnie for the Cowboys. League heads, Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Luminous, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Game Breakers, Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Luminous, Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Red Triumph, Katoni Staggs for the Broncos. Luminous, Mawaki Fodawaika for the Titans. Game Breakers, Terrell May for the Tigers. Luminous, Ali Brigginshaw for the Broncos. Die cut, Zach Lomax for the Eels. Luminous, Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Game Breakers, Keezy Apps for the Tigers. Luminous, Alex Seyfarth for the Tigers. Gladiators, Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins, number 252. Luminous, Keon Kolomatangi for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Ali Latua for the Warriors. Game Breakers, Jacob Carraz for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Jesse Southwell for the Knights. League heads, Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Luciano Leilua for the Dragons. Bang, Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous, Bailey Simonson for the Eels. Game breakers, Sophie Holloman for the Raiders. Luminous Blaze Talagi for Panthers. League heads, Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Luminous Tom Starling for the Raiders. League heads, Murray Talagi for the Cowboys. Luminous Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Bang Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Luminous Sanua Taruva for Tigers. League heads, Tommy Turbo for Manly. Luminous Will Penasini for the Eels. Game breakers, Billy Walters for the Broncos. Luminous Ben Trbojevic for Manly. League heads, Marata Nakor for the Warriors. Luminous Matthew Tomoko for the Raiders. Bang Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Die cut Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous Jonah Pezzett for the Storm. Tyron Wishart Bang for Storm. Luminous Isaiah Papali'i for Panthers. League heads, Alex Twal for the Tigers. Luminous Jacob Carraz for the Bulldogs. Die cut Payne Haas for the Broncos. Luminous Tony Staggs for the Broncos. League heads, Jack Williams for the Eels. Luminous Connolly Lumi Lou for the Dolphins. Red Triumph Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Samuel Stone Street for the Sharks. Game breakers, Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous Sarah Togatuki for the Tigers. I'm going to move this pile. Not many to go from our starter packs. Game breakers, Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Cameron Munster for Storm. League Heads Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous Brian Kelly for Titans. Mercury Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs, number 232. Luminous Jamin Salmon for the Bulldogs. League Heads Isaiah Yeo for Panthers. Luminous Jesse Ramian for the Sharks. Die cut Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Luminous Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Bang Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Tamika Upton for Broncos. 3 to go. Game Breakers Tyron Wishart for Storm. Luminous Sam Walker for the Roosters. Bang Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Luminous John Bateman for the Cowboys. And last one. League Heads Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Luminous Tanila Paseka for Manly. Alright, let's move these out of our way. We will jump up and open this case. Try and condense the bin down a little bit while we're there. Alright, time to get stuck in. So we've got 2 big hits already out of our starter packs, which are here on the table. Let's get stuck into the case of box number 1. Game Breakers Luca Moretti for the Eels. Luminous Apposite Coruscant for the Tigers. Bang Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Luminous Lehe Hopawate for Manly. Game Breakers Kale Iro for the Sharks. Luminous Isaac Tago for Panthers. League Heads Largo for Storm. Luminous Kale Iro for the Sharks. Bang Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Die cut Jake Trbojevic for Manly. Luminous Big Tino for Titans. League Heads Mich Kenny for Panthers. Luminous Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Mercury Murray Talagi for the Cowboys, number 117. Luminous Val Holmes for the Dragons. League Heads Big Tino for the Titans. Luminous Yasmin Clydesdale for the Knights. Game Breakers Alex 12 for the Tigers. Luminous James Fisher Harris for the Warriors. Bang Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Luminous Tamir Martin for the Warriors. Die cut Alex 12 for the Tigers. Luminous Hammer for the Dolphins. League Head Wade Egan for the Warriors. Luminous Gurmat Shabarsky for the Broncos. League Heads Samula Fainu for the Tigers. Luminous Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. Game Breakers Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. Luminous Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. Gladiators, just Joash Papali'i for Eels, number 355. Alex Johnston, Luminous for the Rabbitohs. Red Triumph, Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Luminous, Cohen Hess for the Cowboys. Game Breakers, AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous, Zahara Temera for the Raiders. League Heads, Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Luminous, Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Bang, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous, Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. Game Breakers, KO Weeks for the Raiders. Luminous, Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Another Origin Predictor. League Heads, Tommy Adedan for the Cowboys. Luminous, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Bang, Asaya Yongi for the Eels. Luminous, Keezy Apps for the Tigers. League Heads, Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Luminous, Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. League Heads, Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Robert Toya for the Roosters. Red Triumph, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Luminous, Addo Carr for the Eels. Game Breakers, Trent LaRoe for Storm. Luminous, Cody Nikarima for Dolphins. League Heads, Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Luminous, Jason Saab for Manly. Die Cut, Roger Tuivasa Sheck for the Warriors. Luminous, Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Bang, Leka Halasima for the Warriors. Luminous, Luca Moretti for the Eels. Game breakers, Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. Luminous Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Game breakers, Jamie Chapman for the Titans. Luminous Nico Hines for the Sharks. Die cut, Sam Walker for the Roosters. Luminous Jacob Preston for the Bulldogs. League heads, Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Luminous Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. League heads, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Alifiana Campiera for the Titans. Die cuts, KO Weeks for the Raiders. Luminous Liam Martin for Panthers. Alright, box 1 done and dusted. Straight into box number 2. Game breakers, Kurt Catewell for the Warriors. Luminous Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Bang Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Luminous Sam Verrills for the Titans. League heads, Keon Kolomatangi for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Bradman Best for the Knights. Mercury Ethan Strange for the Raiders, number 4. Nice low one. Luminous Junior Paulo for the Eels. Red Triumph for the Warriors. Luminous Felice Kafusi for the Dolphins. Game breakers, Emily Bass for the Tigers. Luminous Tommy Turbo for Manly. Bang Ruben Garrick for Manly. Excuse me. Luminous Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. Luminous Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Red Triumph Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous Roger Tuivasa Sheck for the Warriors. League heads, Isaiah Katoa for Dolphins. I knew what I meant. Luminous Tiana Penatani Gray for the Sharks. Game Breakers Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous Terrell May for Tigers. Die cuts Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Jack Williams for the Eels. League heads Lehe Hopawate for Manly. Luminous Stefano Yutakamanu for Storm. Bang Zach Lomax for the Eels. Luminous KO Weeks for the Raiders. League heads Moses Leota for Panthers. Luminous Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Bang Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Tui Kamika for Storm. League heads Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous Jake Trbojevic for Manly. Die cut Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Luminous Sean Kepi for the Rabbitohs. Bang Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Luminous Tegan Berry for the Dragons. Game Breakers Cameron Munster for Storm. Luminous Nafor White for Roosters. League heads Chanel Harris Tavita for Warriors. Jack Bostock Luminous for the Dolphins. Game Breakers Payne Haas for the Broncos. Luminous Lindsay Smith for Panthers. Die cuts Xavier Willison for Broncos. Luminous Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. League heads Val Holmes for the Dragons. Luminous Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Gladiators Mich Kenny for Panthers, number 458. Luminous Moses Sulai for the Dragons. League heads Harry Grant for Storm. Luminous Dylan Walker for the Eels. Game breakers Billy Smith for the Roosters. Luminous Zahara Temera for the Raiders. League heads Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous Brian To'o for Panthers. Game breakers James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. Luminous Luke Lolili for Tigers. Die cuts Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous Murray Talagi for Cowboys. Game breakers Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Luminous Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Game breakers Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous and Beau Fermor for the Titans. League heads Greg Marsu for the Knights. Luminous Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Bang Xavier Savage for the Raiders. Luminous Alex Twile for the Tigers. Die cuts Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. Luminous Tyron Wishart for the Storm. Alright, last packet, box number 2. League heads Joash for the Eels. Luminous Kira Dib for the Cowboys. Let's tidy these up and get stuck into box number 3. League heads, Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. Die cut Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Luminous Keanu Kinney for the Titans. Red Triumph Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Luminous Jalen de Groot for Titans. Game Breakers Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Red Triumph AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous Angelina for the Bulldogs. League heads Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Luminous Zach Lomax for the Eels. Bang Marky Mark for Roosters. Luminous Nathan Cleary for Panthers. League heads Jareem Buller for the Tigers. Luminous Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Game Breakers Zach Labour for the Cowboys. Luminous Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. Die cuts Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Luminous Billy Walters for the Broncos. League heads Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Luminous Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. Bang Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Greg Marzhew for the Knights. Game Breakers Luciano Leilua for the Dragons. Luminous Cassie Hiku for the Eels. Game Breakers Fanua Pole for the Tigers. Luminous Kuli Kefu for the Dolphins. Die cuts Reese Walsh for Broncos. Luminous Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. League heads Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Luminous Appy Nichols for the Warriors. League Heads Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous Marky Mark for Roosters. Game Breakers Anessa Biddle for the Sharks. Luminous Carl Lawton for the Cowboys. Bang, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Luminous Fanua Pole for the Tigers. League Heads John Bateman for the Cowboys. Luminous Cameron McInnes for the Sharks. Game Breakers Xavier Willison for Broncos. Luminous Trent LaRoe for Storm. Bang, Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. Mercury Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs, number 419. Luminous Jamal Fogarty for Manly. League Heads Jack Williams for the Eels. Luminous AJ Brimson for the Titans. Bang Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous Marata Nakor for the Warriors. To Kamika Game Breakers for Storm. Luminous Moses the Otter for Panthers. League Heads Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous Wade Egan for the Warriors. League Heads Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Luminous Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Die Cuts Brendan Smith for the Cowboys, Rabbitohs. Mackenzie Wheel, Luminous for the Cowboys. League Heads, Tommy Turbo for Manly. Luminous, Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Wrong way. Gladiators, Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. It's really coming down outside now, number 70. Luminous, Latu Finu for the Tigers. Game Breakers, Ali Latua for the Warriors. Luminous, Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Alright, we got 4 packets left for our third box. Game Breakers, Tolto Koala for Manly. Luminous, Dylan Lucas for Knights. Dally M. Luminous, Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. League Heads, Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Luminous, Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Bang, Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Tommy Dearden, Luminous for the Cowboys. Game Breakers, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Cohen Hess for the Cowboys. League Heads, Isaiah Yeo for Panthers. Luminous, Jaden Campbell for the Titans. Bang, Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. Luminous, Taylor Preston for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers, Lachlan Elias for Dragons. Luminous Ethan Bullymore for Manly. League Heads Jack Williams for the Eels. Luminous Jesse Colquhoun for the Sharks. Red Triumph Dane Gagai for the Knights. Luminous Nico Hines for the Sharks. League Heads Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Luminous Lehel Pawate for Manly. Die cuts Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous Kurt Catewell for Warriors. League Heads Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Red Triumph Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Game Breakers Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Luminous Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. League Heads Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Luminous Dream Buller for Tigers. Game Breakers Blake Brayley for Sharks. Luminous Xavier Coates for Storm. Bang Robert Toya for the Roosters. Luminous Herbie Farnworth for the Dolphins. League Heads Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Dylan Egan Luminous for the Dragons. Die cuts Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Luminous Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Die cuts Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Luminous Abby Church for the Eels. League heads, Roger Tuivasa Sheck for the Warriors. Luminous, Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Bang, Brian Kelly for the Titans. Luminous, Isaiah Yeo for Panthers. Gladiators, Hammer for Dolphins, number 37. Luminous, Dylan Brown for the Knights. Game Breakers, Brian To'o for Panthers. Luminous, Clinton Gutherson for Dragons. League heads, Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. Luminous, Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. Game Breakers, Apasai Coruscant for the Tigers. Luminous, Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. Mercury, Asaya Papalihi for Panthers, number 239. Luminous, Ben Hunt for the Broncos. Bang, Jerome Lowe for Tigers. Luminous, Asai Iongi for the Eels. League heads, Murray Talagi for Cowboys. Luminous, Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Sorry about that. Game Breakers, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Bang, Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Luminous, Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. League heads, Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Jamie Chapman for the Titans. Die cuts, Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Jerome Luai for Tigers. Game breakers, Tamika Upton for the Broncos. Luminous Hudson Young for the Raiders. Gold Triumph. Luminous Apasai Coruscant for the Tigers. Game breakers, Hugo Savala for the Roosters. Luminous Liam Martin for Panthers. League heads, Tommy Turbo for Manly. Luminous Lekahalasima for the Warriors. Bang, Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Hammer for the Dolphins. And that finishes off the box. Alright, box number 5. League heads, Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Largo for Storm. League heads, Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Luminous Angelina for the Bulldogs. Die cuts, Teague Wilton for the Sharks. Luminous Brendan Smith for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers, Dylan Egan for the Dragons. Luminous Zach Lomax for the Eels. League heads, Sam Walker for the Roosters. Luminous Tamale for the Raiders. Bang, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous Nathan Cleary for Panthers. League heads, Connolly Lumi Lou for the Dolphins. Luminous Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. Bang Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Emma Veron for the Sharks. Gladiators, Tom Starling for the Raiders, number 343. Do you want to open that back door, Dave? Please. Billy Walters. Yeah, if it gets too much, well, I heard it not long ago. Billy Walters, Luminous for the Broncos. A couple of the boys are out working in it. Game Breakers, Samima Torfa for the Raiders. Luminous, Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. League Heads, Liam Martin for Panthers. Luminous, Greg Marsu for the Knights. League Heads, Junior Paulo for the Eels. Luminous, Samula Fainu for the Tigers. Game Breakers, Bailey Simonson for the Eels. Kuli Kefu for Dolphins. Bang Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Luminous, Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. League Heads, Cameron McInnes for the Sharks. Luminous, Appy Nichols for the Warriors. Die cut, Dylan Walker for the Eels. Luminous, Carl Lawton for the Cowboys. Die cut, Sam Verrills for the Titans. Luminous, Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Excuse me. Game Breakers, Blaze Talagi for Panthers. Luminous, Fanua Pole for Tigers. Red Triumph for Panthers. Luminous, Cameron McInnes for Sharks. Mercury, Billy Walters for the Broncos, number 326. Luminous, Trent LaRoe for Storm. Game Breakers, Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Luminous, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. League heads, Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Luminous Jamal Fogarty for Manly. Game breakers, Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous AJ Brimson for the Titans. Bang Apasai Coruscant for the Tigers. Luminous Maratta Nakor for the Warriors. League heads, Max King for the Bulldogs. Luminous Moses Leota for Panthers. Red Triumph, Angus Crichton for Roosters. Luminous Philip Semi for the Titans. League heads, Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Luminous Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. Game breakers, William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Die cut, Bronson Sherry for the Bulldogs. Luminous Mackenzie Wheel for the Cowboys. League heads, Luciano Leilua for the Dragons. Luminous Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Bang, Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Luminous Dane Gagai for the Knights. Game breakers, Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Luminous Dylan Lucas for Knights. We have a Dally M rookie predictor. Luminous Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. League heads, Jerome Luai for Tigers. Luminous Connor Watson for the Roosters. Bang, Kale Iro for the Sharks. Luminous Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Game breakers, Olivia Higgins for the Knights. Luminous Hugo Savala for the Roosters. Alright, another box done and dusted. Let's go. Box number 6. Die cuts. Bradman best for the Knights. Luminous Chance Nicole Clockstad for the Warriors. Bang Val Holmes for the Dragons. Luminous Ethan Sanders for the Raiders. League heads James Tedesco for the Roosters. Luminous Jermaine McEwen for the Knights. League heads Brian To'o for Panthers. William Kennedy Luminous for the Sharks. Game breakers Alifiana Khan Kiera for Titans. Luminous Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. League heads Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Luminous Sean Russell for the Eels. Game breakers Tyson Frizzell for the Knights. Luminous James Tedesco for the Roosters. Red Triumph for the Bulldogs. Luminous Azali Hopkins for the Dragons. Bang James Tedesco for the Roosters. Luminous Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. I'm guessing the girls' netball training's cancelled. The chat's going silly. League heads Cameron Munster for Storm. Luminous Ben Trbojevic for Manly. My watch wouldn't stop vibrating. Die cut Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Luminous Max Plath for Dolphins. League heads Gahamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. Luminous Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers Adam Fanua Blake for the Sharks. Luminous Sanua Taruva for Tigers. Die cuts, Jake Averillo for Dolphins. Luminous, Will Penasini for the Eels. League heads, Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. Luminous, Jonah Pezzett for Storm. Game breakers, Tanila Paseka for Manly. Luminous, Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. Game breakers, Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Matthew Tomoko for the Raiders. Daily M Predictor. Luminous, Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. League heads, Jason Saab for Manly. Luminous, Sarah Togatuki for the Tigers. Bang, Jalen DeGroot for Titans. Luminous, Jackson Purdue for Cowboys. Bang, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Connolly Lumi Lou for Dolphins. Game breakers, Tegan Berry for the Dragons. Luminous, Samuel Stonestreet for the Sharks. League heads, Cody Nicarima for the Dolphins. Luminous, Tanila Paseka for Manly. Gladiators, Leka Halasima for the Warriors, number 199. Sam Walker for the Roosters. Red Triumph, Dylan Walker for the Eels. Luminous, Blaze Talagi for Panthers. League heads, Alafiana Kanpi Era for Titans. Luminous, John Bateman for the Cowboys. Game breakers, Bo Fermor for Titans. Luminous, Jamin Salmon for the Bulldogs. Bang, Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Cameron Munster for Storm. League heads, Chance Nicole Clockstad for the Warriors. Luminous, Tom Starling for the Raiders. Game breakers, Liam Martin for Panthers. Luminous, Tamika Upton for the Broncos. League heads, Will Penasini for the Eels. Luminous, Brian Kelly for the Titans. Mercury, Jaden Sewer for the Dragons, number 170. Bailey Simonson for the Eels. Game breakers, Morgan Smithies for Raiders. Luminous, Jesse Southwell for the Knights. 3 packets left for the box. Die cuts, Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous, Luciano Leilua for the Dragons. League heads, Terrell May for the Tigers. Luminous, Jesse Ramian for the Sharks. Bang Fanua Pole for Tigers. And Luminous, Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Alright, another box done and dusted. Let's go. Mercury, Connor Watson for the Roosters, number 396. Luminous, Asaya Katoa for the Dolphins. League heads, AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous, Luke Brooks for Manly. League heads, Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous, Xavier Savage for the Raiders. League heads, Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. Luminous, Bailey Simonson for the Eels. Game breakers, Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Luminous, Jesse Southwell for the Knights. Game breakers, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Georgia Hale for the Titans. Die cuts, Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Luminous, Katoni Staggs for the Broncos. Die cuts, Brian To'o for Panthers. Luminous, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Triumph, Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous, Luciano Leilua for Dragons. League heads, Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. Luminous, Josh Kerr for Dragons. Bang, Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous, Cameron McInnes for Sharks. Die cut, Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Luminous, Jordan Ricky for the Broncos. League heads, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Luminous, Connolly Lumi Lou for the Dolphins. League heads, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Ali Leitua for the Warriors. Game breakers, Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous, Keezy Apps for the Tigers. Red Triumph for the Tigers. Luminous, Jermaine McEwen for Knights. Gladiators, Tanila Paseka for Manly. Number 232. Luminous, Keon Kolomatini for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers, Abby Church for the Eels. Luminous, Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Bang, Nico Hines for the Sharks. Luminous, Alex Seafarth for the Tigers. Bang, Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Adam Fanua Blake for the Sharks. Game breakers, Tyson Frizzell for the Knights. Luminous, Jacob Carraz for the Bulldogs. League heads, Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous, Mich Kenny for Panthers. League heads, Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Luminous, Asaya Papalihi for Panthers. League heads, Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Luminous, Harry Grant for Storm. Game breakers, Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. Luminous, Cameron Munster for Storm. I'll get him to close that door when he comes back. League heads, Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Luminous, Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. I might just gets distracting for me, so I'd hate to know what it sounds like on the other end. But it was warming up in here before, so it was good to get a bit of a fresh air in. Not many breaks left to go, guys. What you see on the shelf just over there, you can't see the two above them, but yeah, there's 6 in total. 4 are already on the website and 2 more to list. That's it. Loco Tonga for the Dragons. Luminous, Jamin Salmon for the Bulldogs. Die cuts, Philip Sammy for the Titans. Luminous, Renato Mulatalo for the Sharks. League heads, Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Luminous, John Bateman for the Cowboys. League heads, Zach Lomax for the Eels. Luminous, Sam Walker for the Roosters. Bang, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Game breakers, Julia Robinson for the Broncos. Luminous, Tanila Paseka for Manly. Game breakers, Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Luminous, Jessica Surgis for the Roosters. Bang, Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous Zach Labour for the Cowboys. Bang, Dream Buller for the Tigers. Luminous Brian Kelly for Titans. Game Breakers Big Tino for Titans. Luminous Loco Tonga for the Dragons. Next box. Bang, Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Luminous Hugo Savala for Roosters. League Heads Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous Falago for Storm. Game Breakers Robert Toya for the Roosters. Wonder what the next series is going to look like. Yeah, well, fingers crossed. We're hoping that it's got some more signatures and maybe some patches. It'd be interesting to see. Brendan Smith, Luminous for the Rabbitohs. I'm sort of hoping that the people that have won a Series 2 hobby box will start getting notifications as to when they're going to get sent out, and that will give us a indication on when that release is due. Junior Paulo, a Red Triumph for the Eels. Luminous Nafor White for Roosters. League Heads Sam Verrills for the Titans. Luminous Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Bang Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Luminous Lindsay Smith for the Panthers. Not that I've seen, and lots of people are posting up their instant win screenshots, but I may have missed them as well. Game Breakers Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. Die Cuts Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Luminous Xavier Willison for the Broncos. League Heads Isaiah Yeo for Panthers. Tommy Turbo Luminous for Manly. Red Triumph for Panthers. Luminous Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Game Breakers Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. League Heads Marata Nakor for the Warriors. Luminous Roger Tuivasa Sheck for Warriors. Game Breakers Jalen de Groot for Titans. Luminous Tiana Penatoni Gray for Sharks. League Heads Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Terrell May for the Tigers. Bang Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. Luminous Jack Williams for the Eels. Game Breakers Nita Maynard for Dragons. Luminous Dylan Walker for the Eels. Gladiators Keon Kolomatangi for the Rabbitohs, number 30. Luminous Zahara Temera for the Raiders. League Heads Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Luminous Brian Tar for Panthers. Die cuts Bailey Simonson for the Eels. Luminous Luke Lolili for Tigers. Game Breakers Gehamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. Luminous Murray Talagi for the Cowboys. Bang Alafiana Khan Kiera for Titans. Luminous Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. League Heads Stefano Utakamanu for Storm. Luminous Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Die cuts Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Luminous Tui Kamikamika for Storm. League Heads Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous Jake Trbojevic for Manly. Game Breakers Isaiah Yongi for the Eels. Luminous Sean Kepi for the Rabbitohs. Bang, Jason Saab for Manly. Luminous, Tegan Berry for the Dragons. League Heads, Hudson Young for the Raiders. Luminous, Tamale for the Raiders. Game Breakers, Isaac Tago for Panthers. Luminous, Emma Veron for Sharks. Die cut, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Samula Fainu for the Tigers. League Heads, Murray Talagi for Cowboys. Luminous, Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Luke Lawlilly, Mercury for Tigers, number 415. Stephen Crichton, Luminous for Bulldogs. Game Breakers, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous, Philip Semi for Titans. League Heads, Alex Twal for Tigers. Luminous, Patrick Carrigan for Broncos. 3 packets left for box number 8. Bang, Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Dane Gagai for the Knights. League Heads, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Connor Watson for the Knights. Die cut, Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. Luminous, Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Alright, before we start the next box, guys, I'm going to duck off to the toilet. Got 4 boxes left to go when we get back, and I won't be long. Let's just mute that for a sec. Alright, we are back and ready to go with our last 4 boxes. Let's get tucked in and grab our next one. League heads, Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Ronaldo Molisalo for the Sharks. League game breakers, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. League heads, Molly Olika R2 for Manly. Luminous, Wade Egan for the Warriors. League heads, Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. Luminous, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Game breakers, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Luminous, Corey Horsburgh for Raiders. Die cuts, Tommy Turbo for Manly. Luminous, Cassie Hiku for the Eels. Bang, William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous, Latu Finu for Tigers. Game breakers, Jaden Campbell for the Titans. Luminous, Ezra Mam for the Broncos. League heads, Cohen Hess for Cowboys. Tommy Dearden, Luminous for Cowboys. Mercury, Fletcher Sharp for the Knights, number 314. Luminous, Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Luminous, Marky Mark for the Roosters. League heads, Brian Kelly for Titans. Luminous, Keanu Kinney for Titans. Bang, Casey McLean for Panthers. Luminous Kyle Flanagan for Dragons. Game Breakers Asaya Katoa for the Dolphins. Luminous Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. Game Breakers Reese Walsh for Broncos. Luminous Mich Kenny for Panthers. Bang Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous and Fanua Blake for Sharks. League Heads Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Bang Ethan Strange for Raiders. Excuse me. Luminous Zach Labour for Cowboys. Die cut Murray Talagi for Cowboys. Luminous Tyson Frizzell for Knights. Bang Zach Labutt for the Cowboys. Luminous Jalen DeGroot for Titans. Game Breakers Appy Nichols for the Warriors. Luminous Luke Brooks for Manly. League Heads Jacob Little for the Dragons. Luminous Xavier Savage for the Raiders. Game Breakers Jerome Luai for the Tigers. Luminous Georgia Hale for the Titans. Gladiators Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys, number 513. Luminous Josh Kerr for the Dragons. Die cuts Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Luminous Katoni Staggs for Broncos. League Heads Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Luminous Asai Papalihi for Panthers. Die cut Stefano Utakamanu for Storm. Luminous Asaya Katoa for Dolphins. Red Triumph, Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Luminous, Jacob Carraz for Bulldogs. Game Breakers, Joash for Eels. Luminous, Alex Seyfarth for Tigers. League Heads, Lindsay Smith for Panthers. Luminous, Keon Kolomatangi for the Rabbitohs. Bang Tolator Koala for Manly. Luminous, Ali Latua for the Warriors. Game Breakers, James Tedesco for the Roosters. Luminous, Jordan Ricky for Broncos. Red Triumph for Manly. Luminous, Jessica Surgis for the Roosters. League Heads, Renato Militalo for Sharks. Luminous, Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Die Cuts, Jareem Buller for the Tigers. Luminous, Harry Grant for the Storm. League Heads, Jacob Carraz for Bulldogs. Luminous, Loco Tonga for the Dragons. And that's another box done and dusted. League Heads, Adam Dewey for Tigers. Luminous, Ali Briganshaw for the Broncos. Jermaine Isako for Dolphins, number 336. Luminous, Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Game Breakers, Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous, Reed Marnie for the Cowboys. League Heads, Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Game breakers, Jack Bostock for Dolphins. Luminous, Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. Bang, Xavier Coates for Storm. Luminous, Adam Dewey for the Tigers. Game breakers, Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Luminous, Dominic Young for the Knights. League heads, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous, Hamali Olika R2 for Manly. Gladiators, Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos, number 132. Luminous, Jerome Hughes for Storm. Die cut, Charlie Staines for the Tigers. Luminous, Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Bang, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous, Milwaukee Fodawaika for the Titans. Game breakers, Tegan Demick for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Bang, Marky Mark for Roosters. Luminous, Jermaine McEwen for Knights. League heads, Payne Haas for Broncos. Luminous, Casey McLean for Panthers. League heads, Anfanua Blake for the Sharks. Luminous, James Tedesco for the Roosters. Triumph, Brendan Smith for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Max Plath for Dolphins. Game breakers, John Bateman for the Cowboys. Luminous, Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Die cuts, Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Chance Nico Klokstad for the Warriors. Game breakers, Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Luminous, Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Bang, Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Luminous Ethan Sanders for the Raiders. Bang Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous Blaze Talagi for Panthers. Game Breakers Chance Nicole Clockstad for the Warriors. Luminous Tom Starling for Raiders. League Heads Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. Luminous Tamika Upton for the Broncos. League Heads James Fisher Harris for the Warriors. Luminous William Kennedy for the Sharks. Die cuts Riley Smith for the Eels. Luminous Jesse Ramian for the Sharks. League Heads Ethan Bullimore for Manly. Luminous Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Game Breakers Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Luminous Ben Trebojevic for Manly. Bang AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous Sanua Taruva for Tigers. Game Breakers Hudson Young for the Raiders. Luminous Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. League Heads Xavier Coates for Storm. Luminous Will Penasini for the Eels. Daly M Predictor. Luminous Jonah Peasant for Storm. League Heads Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Luminous Matthew Tomoko for the Raiders. Red Triumph for the Knights. Luminous Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Die cuts James Schiller for the Knights. Luminous Sean Russell for the Eels. League Heads Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Luminous Zali Hopkins for the Dragons. League heads Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. Luminous Regan Campbell-Gillard for the Titans. And that's another box done and dusted. 2 boxes to go. Alright, box number 11. Game breakers, Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Game breakers, Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Luminous Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Bang, Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Luminous Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. League heads, William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Red Triumph, Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Luminous Jaden Campbell for the Titans. Gladiators, Bo Fermor for the Titans. Number 491. Luminous Lachlan Elias for Dragons. Game breakers, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Luminous Taylor Preston for the Bulldogs. League heads, Milwaukee Fodawaker for Titans. Luminous Ethan Bullymore for Manly. Die cut Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous Jesse Colhoun for the Sharks. Bang Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous Kurt Catewell for the Warriors. League heads, Marky Mark for Roosters. Luminous Belly Smith for Roosters. League heads, Ben Hunt for the Broncos. Luminous Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers, Dream Buller for Tigers. Luminous, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. League heads, Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Dream Buller for the Tigers. Die cut, Isaiah Yo for Panthers. Luminous, Xavier Coates for Storm. Bang Fa'alago for Storm. Luminous, Max King for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Luminous, Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Bang Hugo Savala for the Roosters. Luminous, Dylan Egan for the Dragons. Mercury, Samuel Stone Street for the Sharks, number 131. Luminous, Spencer Leno for the Roosters. Game breakers, Jesse Colquhoun for the Sharks. Luminous, Lyshan Albert Jones for the Warriors. Die cuts, Dallin Watine Zalesniak for the Warriors. Luminous, Reece Walsh for the Broncos. Game breakers, Nafor White for the Roosters. Luminous, Isaiah Yo for Panthers. League heads, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous, Dylan Brown for Knights. Bang Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Luminous, Clinton Gutherson for Dragons. League heads, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous, Ben Hunt for the Broncos. League heads, Apisai Coruscant for the Tigers. Luminous, Tolto Koala for Manly. Die cuts, Hudson Young for the Raiders. Luminous, Asaya Yongi for the Eels. Game Breakers, Harry Grant for Storm. Luminous, Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Red Triumph for the Broncos. Luminous, Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers, Kira Dibb for the Cowboys. Luminous, Dylan Edwards for Panthers. League Heads, Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Luminous, Jamie Chapman for the Titans. Jaden Campbell for Titans. Luminous, Jerome Luai for Tigers. Fourth last packet for the box. League Heads, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Hudson Young for the Raiders. Instant win. Luminous, Leka Halasima for the Warriors. League Heads, Tom Starling for the Raiders. Luminous, Payne Haas for the Broncos. Alright, last packet for the box, second last box. League Heads, Jermaine Isako for Dolphins, and Luminous, Abby Church for the Eels. Alright, box number 12, lucky last. Bang, Cameron Munster for Storm. Luminous, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. League Heads, Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Luminous, Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Die cut, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Game Breakers, Loco Tonga for the Dragons. Luminous, Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. Bang Ali Latour for the Warriors. Luminous Isaac Tago for Panthers. League Heads Marata Nakor for the Warriors. Luminous Alifiana Kampi Era for Titans. Red Triumph for Cowboys. Luminous Adokar for Eels. Die cuts Jesse Arthurs for the Broncos. Luminous Robert Toya for the Roosters. Game Breakers Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous Samaima Torfa for the Raiders. League Heads Fanua Pole for the Tigers. Tamir Martin Luminous for the Warriors. Bang Lehe Hopawate for Manly. Luminous Yasmin Clydesdale for the Knights. League Heads Dylan Walker for the Eels. Luminous Val Holmes for the Dragons. Die cuts AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous Big Tino for Titans. Game Breakers Tiana Penatani for the Sharks. Luminous Kale Arrow for the Sharks. Bang Tamale for the Raiders. Luminous Cody Nikarima for Dolphins. League Heads Robert Toya for the Roosters. Luminous Jason Saab for Manly. Die cut Egan Butcher for the Roosters. Luminous Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Game Breakers Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous Gehamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. League Heads Reese Walsh for Broncos. Luminous Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Game Breakers Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Luminous Keezy Apps for the Tigers. Game Breakers KO Weeks for the Raiders. Luminous Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. League heads Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Luminous Luca Moretti for the Eels. Game Breakers Alehe Hopawate for Manly. Luminous James Fisher-Harris for Warriors. Bang Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Luminous Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Gladiators Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs, number 263. Luminous Reed Marnie for the Cowboys. League heads Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Damien Cook for the Dragons. Game Breakers Cooley Kefu for the Dolphins. Luminous Adam Dewey for the Tigers. Bang Jermaine Isako for the Dolphins. Luminous Dominic Young for the Knights. League heads KO Weeks for the Raiders. Luminous Hamoli Olika R2 for Manly. Red Triumph Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitoh. G'day mate, Bulldogs edits today. Luminous Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. We have 6 packets left to go. League heads Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Luminous Milwaukee Fotowaika for Titans. Game Breakers Mahalia Murphy for the Eels. Luminous Ali Brigginshaw for the Broncos. League heads Keanu Kinney for the Titans. Luminous Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. Die cuts Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Jerome Hughes for Storm. League heads Jake Trbojevic for Manly. Luminous Casey McLean for Panthers. And lucky last Mercury, Philip Semi for the Titans, number 152. And Luminous Jacob Preston for the Bulldogs. Alright, let's go back to the very beginning with our instant win out of the starter packs. That was our very first packet. For the Dragons, Warren Stoddart. Actually, I don't have my team list up. I'm pretty sure it was Warren. Yes. Congratulations, Warren. Next up, we had our Origin Predictor, number 113. Max King for the Bulldogs. Alright, next up. That's right. We had the Origin Predictor in the starter case. So we had the instant win and the Origin Predictor, and we scored Origin Predictor again in the retail. Number 32, Hammer for the Dolphins. That's better. Alright, next up, Dally M Predictor, number 261. Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. We have a Golden Triumph, number 69 for the Bulldogs. And our Dally M Rookie of the Year for the Knights, number 38. Next up, Dally M, number 52, Zach Lomax for Eels. Another Dally M, number 255, William Kennedy for the Sharks. Now it's quite funny that the first big pull we had was an instant win. The last one we got was an instant win. But what really makes it funny is it's another Dragons. Congratulations, Warren, taking out 2 instant wins. I tried to keep quiet about that when I hit it. I struggled not to say it was at least the same team. So congratulations. And that's all our hits. And back to the very beginning, which is the bonuses that we showed off before we started breaking. And that's the 26 League Heroes Hobby Box and the sticker combo with the album and box as well. All our current breaks have these bonuses in it, and we're about to randomize this one and find out who the lucky winner is that will have them sent out with their break cards. Ready? Number 1, number 2, and lucky last, number 3. Oh, no way. Congratulations, Warren with Dragons. Warren's been a bit lucky in the breaks of late, and especially hitting the 2 instant wins with the bonuses. That's massive. Congratulations. We'll get all that fixed up for you, as you know. Thank you to everyone for being a part of it. But that is it. That is all. Hope you had a ball.